first up. And that is the latest report from Net Zero Watch. They do report every single year into the BBC, and they're reporting on climate. This report is into what happened on the BBC in 2023. Tall climate tales from the BBC. And here to discuss it is the Deputy Director of Net Zero Watch, Andrew Montfort. Good afternoon to you, Andrew.
Good afternoon, Julia.
This was a glorious read. I retweeted it on X yesterday when I saw it. And basically, I mean, every single year this review just exposes the most blatantly unfact-based reporting. I mean, it's not even reporting by many BBC reporters. It's hysteria a lot of the time. The language around, which you expect from The Guardian, you know, or from some lunatic climbing up a gang tree over the M25 with wearing a yellow an orange T-shirt saying "Just Stop Oil." The hysteria and the willingness to just blame climate change for pretty much anything and everything that happens, to claim every single temperature or weather event as a result of climate change, and it's getting worse. But this is beyond just a little bit of editorial, isn't it? Their reporting is, I mean, it's downright untrue a lot of the time, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think they want to use basically or anything that they can possibly connect to climate change, they are going to do so. You know, whether it is true or not. I mean, there's so many stories in this paper. I mean, the thing that actually struck me when I first saw the manuscript was just how many examples that the author had found. I mean, there are over 30, and he's clearly only scratching the surface of what the BBC has done. And some of the connections they make are utterly ludicrous. I mean, there's one nice example of somebody spotted a rare bird in the south of England somewhere. It was called a black-winged stilt. And the BBC said this had been seen because of climate change. Its range was being pushed up into the UK. And you only have to look for a moment at the ornithological records to see that this bird has been seen in the UK since at least the 17th century. So it's utter madness to say it's something to do with climate change. It's just a bird that turns up occasionally. I mean, it's simply untrue. I mean, look, we've seen report after report, haven't we, where hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, droughts, heat waves, storms, wildfires. I mean, depending on what is the most sort of fashionable story of the moment. I mean, wildfires are a very big story in Greece at the moment. Absolutely terrible for the people they impact. I was in Sicily last year. We had wildfires. We had the motorway on fire on the central reservation and on the right hand side. I mean, it was very scary. Never seen anything like this before. It's quite obvious the Sicilians were completely used to this. And when we spoke to them, locals, they were going, "Oh, it happens every year." It was being reported as this unbelievably awful thing that was happening only as a result of climate change. But all of these things we're told by the BBC again and again, they are happening. They're happening more often. They are more severe. It's going to get worse, and it is down to climate change. Is there any evidence that any of these things are happening more often, are more severe, and they're down to climate change? The official science on this is very clear. There's a
So this isn't you saying this. This is the official.
No. This is the official science. So this is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. If you go to their report, you look at table 12.12 in the most recent report. It lists all the weather and climate phenomena and says which ones they've been able to find increases in or significant changes in. And essentially, there's almost nothing. It's heat waves and average temperatures. Yes, up. Almost everything else. Hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, drought, you name it, they can't detect any significant change in at all. So the official science is quite clear on this. So the BBC, when they tell you that tornadoes are getting worse, well, it just isn't true.
And it's not a matter of opinion, because they're able to log tornadoes using satellites and weather data, and they know how many there have been, and they know how long they last and how severe they are.
And the trend is clearly downwards. You know, there are fewer tornadoes and there are fewer.
Is that due to climate change? I mean, who knows? Like, we have seen heat waves. Look, we've had a heat wave here. We had a heat wave this summer. I mean, last summer it was too much. We're not made for this, you know. But the argument, obviously, dealing with heat waves is, I mean, people die as a result of heat waves. It's not just unpleasant for a lot of us, but of course, more people die from cold than die from heat by a factor of like 9 to 1. And yet, we never seem to hear so much about that, do we?
No. I mean, and this is the thing, it's the old journalistic thing of if it bleeds, it leads. And of course, if you can say that more people are dying of heat, then that, of course, that is scary and suits the narrative. But all those people who are not losing their lives because winters are less warm, we don't hear about. No. It is a remarkable fact that even in countries like India and Australia, more people die of cold than of heat. That
even in countries that can get hot. And the key thing, I would have thought that the best way of stopping people dying from heat is for people to be richer, to have affordable energy, be able to afford to air condition their homes and their cars and the like, and that using fossil fuels. So, I mean, that might mitigate, mightn't it? Let's go through some more of these examples, though, because it's not just the black-winged stilt, is it, that apparently is not being cited in Britain just because of climate change. There was also a story in the BBC about how climate change is making mosquito-borne disease more common. Is that true?
Yeah. So they're talking about one particular species of mosquito, the tiger mosquito, and they say that, because of climate change, its range is moving north, and therefore it's going to bring these diseases to the UK. The problem is that the tiger mosquito lives quite happily in hot countries, and it lives quite happily in cold countries. It can survive freezing cold winters in Korea, no problem at all.
No factor there.
Climate change will make no difference to it.
What about climate change? Apparently was blamed for, and again, this is when reporters or the news website, the BBC, saying, this is due to climate change. The fatal train crash in Stonehaven.
Yeah, that's right. So there was a landslide near Stonehaven, and a train ran into it, and 2 or 3 people, I think, were tragically killed. And they said that the rain that had caused the landslide was due to climate change. But in fact, when they did the inquiry into the incident, it was shown that the drainage system in the hillside hadn't been installed correctly, and that was the reason for it. They're making it up.
But it's never corrected. It's people just remember reading it, and people I know who I would normally consider to be well educated and knowledgeable, and they consider themselves like they lap this stuff up. And I would say, if your source of news is only the BBC, you are not getting proper news on this. What about the erosion of cliffs in Norfolk? That's definitely due to climate change, right?
Definitely not. The British Geological Survey says that those cliffs in Norfolk, at a place called Happisburgh, have been receding for something like 5,000 years. It's nothing to do with climate change.
Were we burning fossil fuels 5,000 years ago?
Not as far as I'm aware. No, the odd wood and dung, perhaps, but no fossil fuels. I think not.
But again, I remember seeing the reporters on edge. I mean, I watched the BBC just to get my blood pressure up. A crocodile biting a woman was also blamed. I love these stories.
It's an amazing story. So she had apparently the well outside her house. This is in Indonesia. The well outside her house had dried up because there was a drought, and so she'd had to go to the communal well. And at the communal well, she was bitten by a crocodile. Therefore, climate change causes women to be bitten by crocodile. I mean, it's so bonkers. But they must love this. At the BBC.
And what about coming back closer to home? Potholes. Everyone moans about the potholes. That's beginning to hit everybody now. There have been tens of billions of pounds worth of damage to our roads. According to the BBC, that's as a result of climate change as well.
Yeah, but of course, potholes are caused by sort of water in the tarmac freezing and expanding, and so sort of if we're getting global warming, there should be less of that, not more of it. So the idea that it's potholes is nonsense. I think in reality, it's actually down to climate change policy, because of course we're putting all these heavy electric cars on the roads, and they're breaking the road surface up. So we can blame climate policy, not climate
policy on that. And also, you did mention a little bit earlier about, actually the IPCC, International Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is regarded as the body. Whenever I've mentioned them on TV in Question Time, and I've talked to people about, doesn't actually say that in those reports. We'll go, yeah, it does. It really doesn't. Point to me where it says that. But you said, they have said, we are seeing more, average temperatures going up. But you at the Net Zero Watch have been looking at how we measure temperature, not just globally, but nationally as well. We get sort of, it's the highest. Everyone's really surprised that we had the hottest day of the year in the middle of summer in August in this country. I mean, knock me down with a feather. I assumed it was going to be in January, Andrew. But never happened when I was a kid. That didn't happen before we had fossil fuels. But in terms of how we measure temperature in this country, an awful lot of the information we're getting on temperature now is frankly bunkum, isn't it?
I think there are severe problems with the surface temperature records. So we have weather stations around the country which are very dodgy because they're not maintained properly, and they don't go back very far. The coverage is mainly in the developed world. There's not a lot of coverage in the rest of the world. So yeah, that data is very dodgy. We have satellites as well, which give you better coverage, but obviously the record's much shorter. I think it's probably fair to say that it has got warmer.
Yes.
But it is very hard to say.
We're coming out of an ice age, so it would get warmer, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, there's that. Yeah, it is very hard to say whether what we're seeing is anything out of the ordinary at all. For that, you need these great big climate models, computer simulations of the climate, which, are really, really dodgy. Well,
and also, you put in your assumptions, and then, of course, those assumptions will drive the output. But in terms of the temperature gauges, we often have, the highest temperature recorded, near Heathrow. If you've got a temperature gauge somewhere which used to be basically lovely fields and is now full of tarmac with plane engine hot fumes on a hot summer's day, I'm not surprised if you get a high temperature reading.
That one comes around year after year. You often get the temperature records, but if you go and look where they are, it's very often Heathrow. And if not, there's a military airbase, an RAF station, which also does quite a lot of temperature records, which I assume is just a jet driving past and driving up the temperature temporarily. It's all very, very dodgy, these sort of temperature records. Of course, if you have tens of thousands of temperature stations, you would expect one of them to give you a record most years, but just if it was completely random.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's